And this is a very significant and serious occasion that will be in the history books.
In about 3 hours, day 2 of the historic impeachment trial of Ken Paxton is set to begin, and we expect a packed day of witness testimony. The suspended attorney general pleading not guilty to 16 articles of impeachment. High-profile attorneys on both sides laid out their cases in opening statements yesterday.
And there is still a long way to go with state senators ultimately deciding Paxton's fate. We do have team coverage this morning. Chris Sadeghi gives us a look at what we can expect today.
But we start with Jason Wheeler with more on just how this trial began, and we didn't get to hear much testimony on day 1.
Yesterday, 6 witnesses were sworn in. We were expecting that we might hear from some or all of them, but we only heard partial testimony from one of them because the senators who are acting as jurors had so much other business to get to as well. But even with just that partial testimony from one witness, we're starting to get a good idea already of where the prosecution is headed with its case.
Are you a rhino? Am I a rhino?
As the first witness took the stand, the prosecution made clear he's not a Republican in name only.
I'm certainly far from right of center. I was nominated by President Trump to be a federal judge. I would describe myself as an evangelical Christian.
This was the top deputy Ken Paxton had personally recruited and hired, who for years loved the boss he worked for, he says, until he and his colleagues kept seeing what prosecutors call
of Mr. Paxton's slow creep of corruption.
Even then, Jeff Mateer says he tried to help guide Paxton.
I urged him not to have any further dealings with Nate Paul.
But eventually, prosecutors say it got to be too much, that in an effort to help a political donor friend named Nate Paul, Ken Paxton repeatedly misused his office.
Mr. Paxton turned the keys of the Office of Attorney General over to Nate Paul.
Mateer ended up resigning, and with 7 other members of Paxton's management team, reported Paxton's actions to law enforcement. Even still, the defense of the now suspended AG says those employees were rogue and wrong.
Ken Paxton gave nothing of significance to Nate Paul.
Ken Paxton did get some good news on day 1 of the trial. He can't be forced to testify, as he is tried for 16 impeachment articles, each of which he pleaded through an attorney. The bad news for Paxton, though, his multiple motions to exclude evidence or throw out charges were shot down by overwhelming and bipartisan votes.
No, nay, no.
In Austin, I'm Jason Wheeler.
Now, we do want to bring in Chris Sadeghi live in Austin. Chris has covered the Capitol for years now. Chris, as Jason mentioned, we didn't get a lot of testimony on day 1, but still some eyebrow-raising moments. What stuck out to you?
Yes, it was very obvious the defense team wanted to be very calculated with how they handled the procedural votes at the beginning and also the not guilty pleas. Ken Paxton had the opportunity to make those pleas himself, but instead it was his attorney, Tony Busby, making the pleas, and on top of each plea, adding his own little commentary with each article, saying that it was factually incorrect, saying one was a lie, saying even one was offensive. Now, eventually, the House Board of Managers objected to his commentary on each plea, and the objection was sustained, and it stopped. And then, of course, the big one, Ken Paxton not showing up to the afternoon session. That caught a lot of people, including the House Board of Managers, by surprise. Perhaps it's his way of telling the Senate exactly what he thinks of this impeachment trial. Of course, more importantly, what do the senators who will be voting on his ability to remain in office, what do they think of his disappearing act? Mark and Karen.
Well, yeah, I did want to read this tweet from Ken Paxton yesterday, Chris, where he says, "I want to thank you all for your prayers and support. I will never back down for defending freedom." Given the fact that he left and he wasn't present during the afternoon, what was the sense in Austin of him being gone for his own trial?
It was definitely a surprise, and it is kind of viewed as maybe Ken Paxton sending a message about how he feels about this trial without actually having to talk. As I mentioned, he was given the opportunity to speak for himself when he had the chance to enter his own pleas. He chose not to do that. He chose not to show up to the afternoon session. But yet then, yes, he goes on in the afternoon and sends that post on X, trying to reach his support group, which there were a lot of them here yesterday, and maybe telling everybody how he feels about this entire process and getting his message out there while at the same time seeming to snub the proceedings here at the Capitol.
That definitely is a possibility. Chris, okay, we heard from one witness yesterday, partial testimony, even though 6 were sworn in. What are we looking forward to today? Could we actually hear from more witnesses?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, we want to see if Ken Paxton even shows up. That is a big question. Will he do what he did yesterday? Does he plan on not being here for the course of these proceedings? That is a big question we should get the answer to relatively early. But yes, the testimony. We didn't hear much of it yesterday, but that is the real meat and potatoes of this trial. That is why we're here. And the first witness yesterday, Jeff Mateer, did give us an idea of how people within the AG's office viewed the relationship between Paxton and Nate Paul, which is the cause for this impeachment trial, what they felt was odd, and we should get more from him as he is on the stand still this morning, and then also with all the witnesses that come after him. Mark and Kara.
Okay, thanks for the insight, Chris. Appreciate it. Our live streaming coverage will also continue at 8:30 this morning. Investigative reporter Tanya Iser and a panel of political experts are giving us insight and analysis of the testimony. You can watch on WFAA Plus, on the go at WFAA.com.